Thanks for tuning in to Christian Devotion Speak Up, the show where Christian leaders come on and share their saving knowledge of Jesus Christ and how he brought them to serve the kingdom in a big way. I'm your host, Scott McCausey, and I welcome you to stick around and hang out with us. We've got a great show planned just for you.
Fantastic guest on the show here tonight, Marc Eckel, who is a painter, performer. We're going to talk more to him here in a little bit. If you don't know what Splat Experience is, to better understand what we're going to be talking about, you can dive onto YouTube, type that in, and you'll get a good idea of what's going on. But we'll kind of describe it as we go on tonight on the air with you guys. This is Scott McCausey with Christian Devotion Speak Up. Marc Eckel, welcome to Christian Devotion Speak Up.
Hey, Scott. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's my privilege to bring you on because you've got some cool things going on here to serve the kingdom in a big way. But I'm going to start at the beginning. I want to ask you a couple questions about life growing up as a kid. What was life like growing up as a kid, Marc?
Well, I grew up in a great Christian home. Mom and Dad were always at church, and we were always with them. The doors of the church were open, and we were usually the first ones in. So kind of grew up. My wife says we grew up in the Christian bubble.
Okay.
So always had a very cool Christian home. Mom and Dad loved each other, still do. If you look back, it was a great childhood. I had a twin brother, so always had somebody my age to play with. I have an older brother, younger sister. And we just, did a lot of the stuff that most kids do, riding bikes and playing baseball and sports and going to church and doing stuff with the youth group, so.
Awesome. And you mentioned that you had a twin brother. Was it like identical? I mean, people couldn't tell you and your brother apart, or not quite that close?
I got to where I could tell us apart. It took a while. We're not identical. We talk alike, have the same type of voice and the same walk, and it's kind of, if you don't know that I have a twin brother and he walks in, it kind of takes you off guard because we're so similar. But, technically we're not identical. Some people might say, I don't believe that.
Right.
But the doctors say we're not, so I'm going to stick to that.
Well, Marc, you mentioned you grew up in a Christian home. How did you discover the love of Christ? Was this at a young age through the teachings of your parents?
Yeah, that and just being involved in children's church and church as a kid. I remember one time when I was very young, my dad came into my room one night and sat down on the edge of my bed and told me about Jesus and asked me if I wanted to accept Christ. And I don't think I really was old enough to really understand that fully. A little while later, I was probably first grade or so, in children's church during on a Sunday morning. They asked if anybody wanted to ask Jesus into their life, and I made the decision then. Because of that, I was a little bit late getting out of church, and my mom and dad kind of got mad because, got to get home and get to the casserole. And all that stuff. So I didn't say anything. I'm sure they would have been delighted if they knew why I was a little behind, but that's where it was.
Obviously art is in your blood. I've been promoting the program coming up all week long, and part of the gift that God gave you is this artistic talent. How did this happen? Did you love drawing and painting as a kid? Well,
the family story, the family lore says that my twin brother Matt used to draw or color with crayons. And I used to watch him, and I really wouldn't get involved. And then around the age 2, I stole the crayons, and I became the artist. And I don't know if it's exactly that way, but I really can't recall a time in my life when I wasn't an artist. I mean, even in kindergarten, in first grade, I was the standout artist. I mean, I always had that gift, and I've always been kind of defined because of that creative gift. It's always been a part of who I am. And, and because of that, that's the only world that I know. I look at my 2 boys who are very creative, very artistic, very musical, and I try to explain to them, the way you see life is not the way most people see it, because you have a very creative brain like I do. I often said, when I married you, I didn't know I'd end up with 3 of you, because my boys are exact, the way I am, very creative, very artistic. And so it's just kind of, for me, it's the way life is. I don't understand why you can't draw a portrait or paint a picture, because that's the way I'm geared. And was there a specific kind of art that you enjoyed doing when you were younger?
Was it drawing? Was it painting? Was there a specific that you really enjoyed?
Well, my dad used to take us to the library, just the city library in Madison Heights, Michigan, a suburb of Detroit. We would always sit down at one of the tables and get the big giant coffee book of Norman Rockwell illustrations.
Okay.
So he kind of became a hero of mine real early on in life as far as his style and what he painted and his realistic style. Mm-hmm. So I always wanted to be a Norman Rockwell. You know, and so most of my work was always photorealistic. You know, there's nothing abstract or anything crazy like that. It was all very defined and very detailed. So that's kind of where I started out as a kid. My grandmother, my Grandma Eckel, she loved my drawing, and I kind of lived as a young child to draw pictures for her. And every Sunday in church, I would draw pictures for my grandmother. And I think because of her encouragement and her joy in seeing what I did, I excelled even more at it than I probably would have otherwise. Life was always about drawing pictures. I did a lot of Bible story drawings, and you go through phases when you're a kid. I drew robots for a while.
Oh, yeah.
Or all those type of things. You know, at some point you're always drawing the Disney characters, and, you know, you kind of progress and all that stuff, but I always loved to draw.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty cool. And I have to back up, and I'm going to throw a complete monkey wrench into where we're going right now because you just mentioned that you grew up in Michigan. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Well, that's fantastic, and that's something I didn't know. So it's football season. You mentioned earlier that you're kind of, a sports kid. Is it blue and gold, or is it green and white?
I like purple.
So not a big football guy.
Not a big football guy. My favorite color is dark cobalt violet. You know, it's a deep purple, but it's an artist thing. But right. I tell people a lot of times on the road that I'll say, what's your football team? We didn't have a professional team in Detroit. The Lions.
That's for sure.
So we had those times when, we used to follow the Tigers, and I used to follow the Pistons a little bit. My dad's a big Red Wings fan. He loves hockey. Uh-huh. But, my dad was never much of a football guy. He was more of a baseball, hockey type thing.
Yeah.